Welcome to tonight's live stream. I am going to get started in a moment. I just need to let all of my viewers who are on social media know that the stream is getting started. What's going on, Tanya's Darkroom 007? Glad to see you here. Okay, let me get this promoted to Facebook, and then I'm gonna go into the perfunctory. Okay, before I start talking about tonight's topic, I want everyone to know about the SJS Direct 2022 paperbacks, John Haynes at Death's Door, ISIS Legacy, and Eastern Horror of the Hyena Woman. All of these books are available on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. And you'll be able to get all of these books, in paper and digital format on Amazon.com right now by clicking a link that I'm going to post in the chat. And a book that your Tia Mowry desperately needs to read, The Woman Crisis. This is my latest nonfiction book and is a companion to the critically acclaimed 2018 nonfiction book, The Man Crisis. And this book shows you why many of America's women are struggling right now, like your Tia Mowry is doing right now. And this is a book that will open up many women's eyes to let them know why they are not able to find any of the so-called happiness that they are out here actively searching for. So this book is available in paperback right now, and you can get your Kindle edition by clicking that link to Amazon, because you can pre-order your book, your Kindle version right now, and it'll be delivered to your digital device on November 29th. So with all of that perfunctory done, I'm going to get right into tonight's topic, which absolutely grinds my gears, and that is your Tia Mowry going out here and romanticizing single motherhood. Now, there were several articles that were presented on various websites like your BET.com and your other platforms. I'll leave a link to these articles. And you have your Tia Mowry talking about how she's in awe of being a single mom and sitting there going out here and making it look like something positive to be in. Now, as somebody who grew up in the South Bronx, the single mother capital of the world, I find Tia Mowry's observations about single motherhood to be extremely irresponsible, and I also find them to be extremely disingenuous. And the reason why I find them to be extremely irresponsible is because your Tia Mowry is sending a message to young Black girls and young Black women that being a single mother is something that women should aspire to. And that message right there is extremely irresponsible to go out here and present as something to be socially normal and socially acceptable. I mean, this kind of message, as I see it, really goes completely against the old African proverb, which says a race can rise no higher than the moral position of its women, and as the woman goes, so goes the race. And when I have, as someone who's lived in the South Bronx for all of my 49 years, every single mother has had such a low moral position that the only direction that the whole Bronx community has gone is downhill. And many of the black women who became single mothers in the late 60s and the late 70s, many of those women, their lives went into a major decline because they didn't have a father in the home to go out here and establish order or establish structure. And because there was no father in the home to establish order or structure, many of those families who lived in areas like the South Bronx, they just completely fell apart. And instead of those children growing up to become healthy children, most of those children grew up to become children of the corn. But we've got your Tia Mowry, a black celebrity, going out here and talking about single motherhood like it's something positive, and it's nothing positive at all. No, when it comes down to most single mothers are living in misery. But we've got your Tia Mowry out here promoting this message to young black girls and young black women, telling them, oh, that single being a single mother is something positive when single motherhood is nothing positive to be at all. No, I remember a time in the 70s and the 80s growing up when being a single mother was considered to be a shame. But we've got your Tia Mowry out here talking about how it's a positive thing. And this just shows me how she's basically sold out black people, because when you're sitting here promoting single motherhood and going out here and promoting that kind of narrative, you've basically betrayed all of these brothers and sisters out here by going out here and promoting a message that, as I see it, is basically you co-signing many of these anti-black racists who believe that single motherhood is a social norm for black people, when it's never been a norm for black people. And if you look at the history of black people before black women embraced the feminist movement of the late 1960s, you will see that black families were intact, and there were more black men and women getting married and having two-parent families than most of the whites and non-blacks who were in this country. It was mostly black people who were going out here and getting married, and it was mostly black people who were going out here and building and establishing families. Unfortunately, the daughters of those silent generation parents, for the most part, they started to want to get this white acceptance. And as they went out here and got this or go on this quest for this white acceptance, they went out here and looked to join the feminist movement, not understanding that the feminist movement was looking to go out here and socially engineer dysfunction as a social norm, because most of the feminists themselves, they came from dysfunction. And they came from dysfunction because many of your feminists, they usually came from single mother households. And many of these black women, they bought into those narratives because they themselves wanted that white acceptance. And many black women wanted to be like white women, not understanding that white supremacy played a game on those black women by giving them the feminists to go out here and follow. because the feminist herself was a very dysfunctional white female. And as Black women followed these white females, thinking that they could be just like white women, what happened to those Black women was they wound up following dysfunctional ideologies. And as they followed these dysfunctional ideologies, they thought they were norms. And what we're seeing here is another attempt to promote those dysfunctional narratives to a new generation of young Black people. But what they're doing now is they're using a Black celebrity to be the face of promoting that dysfunction. Instead of going out here and using a white face to go out here to promote this dysfunction, they go out here and try to use a Black celebrity to go out here and promote this dysfunction. And that's what your Tia Mowry is going out here doing by talking about how she wants to be a single mom. She's sitting up here promoting these anti-Black and white supremacist talking points and thinking that you're doing this as something normal. No, this is you being used as a pawn by the white supremacists to promote anti-Black narratives and anti-Black racism towards Black people and promote narratives that, again, are extremely dysfunctional for the young sisters to go out here and hear. Now, your Tia Mowry, as she's been romanticizing single motherhood, she's doing this in the aftermath of the divorce from her husband, Corey Hardick, who she had been married to for 14 years. And as she goes out here and divorces your Corey Hardick, what she's doing is trying to show how so-called empowered she is on her quest for so-called happiness. And I have to call bullshit on this quest for so-called happiness because as someone who has lived in the Bronx for 49 years of my life and seen it go from being a ghetto to the single mother capital of the world, I can tell you there's no happiness that many of these single mothers have. No, most of these women are miserable, and most of these women just sit there with their grills cooking, and they're sitting there with their grills cooking because their reasons for becoming single mothers are not romanticized. No, most of the women here in the South Bronx, they became single mothers because they usually try to create a covert contract with the man that they were involved with, usually a Pookie or a Ray Ray, or sometimes many of these women even had a good working brother. And because the relationship wasn't going in the direction that they wanted, what some of these women did in an effort to try to get this man to make a commitment was they would go out here and get pregnant by this man, hoping that this would lead to this man making a commitment to them. And what happened to in this case is that many of these guys, they were usually bottom feeding guys, and they weren't really interested in a commitment. No, most of them just wanted to go out here and get the draws. But many of these women, because they didn't have a father or a mother to go out here and teach them how relationships work, what happened was that many of these women wound up thinking that they could go out here and try to go out here and coerce this man into making a commitment. Now, as I talked about in my previous live stream where I talked about a chapter in The Woman Crisis, there was a chapter I called A Woman's Right to Choose a Man. Many of the single moms out here thought they were going to go out here and choose a man and make him into the man that they desired. But in most cases, they didn't understand that this ran counter to God's natural order, and it ran counter to the traditional rules of courtship. Now, in the traditional rules of courtship, many men have to go out here and be vetted by a father. But in the 60s, you had many of the feminists out here and many of the Black women who were indoctrinated into feminism. They thought they could choose the man that they wanted and get him to commit to a relationship on their terms. Unfortunately, they didn't understand that Any man who commits to a woman under her terms is a weak beta male, and only weak beta males go out here and look to submit to the woman on her terms. But whenever a woman goes out here and gets a man to submit to her on her terms, she doesn't respect that man because that man, in her eyes, is a weak man. And because she sees him as weak, she does not respect him. And that's something your Tia Mowry doesn't understand about going out here and talking about how you're a single mother, because this is a major disrespect to the man that you are involved with. And your Tia Mowry basically disrespects the father of her child, Corey Hardick, by going out here and being a part of an article talking about how she's a single mom when she didn't have those kids by herself. No, in order for her to have those two children, she had to have had those kids with that father. And that father, Corey Hardick, was active in those children's lives. So she's sitting here talking about how she's loving being a single mom when that man was in her life for 14 years, and that man still actively wanted to be in her life. But she's going to sit here and talk about how she's loving being a single mom. Again, more bullshit from your Tia Mowry, who is sitting here trying to convince us, oh, she's enjoying being a single mom. No, nobody enjoys being a single mom, but she's sitting here trying to sell Black women on this nonsense and trying to sell Black women on this whole idea. Oh, it's great to be a single mom. No, it's not great to be a single mom. And only an insane woman is going to choose to be a single mom, like your Halle Berry, who went out here and was like, I want to have a child on my terms. And we see from Halle Berry how this didn't work out for her because she's living a dysfunctional life in Bust Downtown right now. And it looks like your Tia Mowry is looking to go out here and get apartment 7D across the hall from Halle Berry because she's volunteering to be a single mother and looking to be a single mother willfully and intentionally. And there's no woman who, again, actively goes out here looking to be a single mother. No woman actively goes out here saying, I want to be a single mom. No, many women wind up becoming single mothers, either through trying to either go out here and trying to persuade a guy who is non-committal into committing to her, or sometimes they're with a working dude and they're out here having sex, and then all of a sudden they wind up pregnant, and that's how they become single mothers because, again, this guy is just out here looking to smash, and as a result, they wind up pregnant, or in some cases, the woman winds up divorcing her husband, and due to irreconcilable differences because she didn't know about the courtship process and she didn't know about the vetting process in order to weed out men who are non-committal. She didn't understand what the rules of engagement were. And because she didn't understand what the rules of engagement were, what happens is that your women usually wind up in these situations, but they're not willfully and intentionally looking to do this. No woman wants to go out here and be a single mother. No, many women, they think they can go out here and use a child to go out here and create a covert contract that would lead into marriage. Unfortunately, when you go out here and try to create that covert contract to lead into marriage, it always fails because you're trying to make the man submit to you on your terms. And if a man submits to a woman on her terms, she's going to see that guy as weak. She's not going to respect him. And even if he marries her, she's going to have nothing but contempt for him because that man is not out here showing that he's a leader that she can go out here and want to go out here and follow. So your Tia Mowry sitting up there trying to promote this narrative. Oh, I want to be a single mother. And again, that's just extremely irresponsible to promote this message to all of these young sisters out here. You're promoting a message that's basically going to lead to many of these sisters winding up becoming some of the 70% of modern Black women who are currently single right now. Like I talk about in my book, why 70% of Black women are single. So you can get why 70% of Black women are single on Amazon right now, along with the Woman Crisis, and learn more about all of the dysfunctional ideas that your Tia Mowry is promoting to young women, and sitting there not understanding. She's out here thinking, oh, I'm promoting this empowering message. No, you're not promoting an empowering message. All you're doing is parroting these white supremacist talking points that have been pushed in the Black community for over 60 years. Because for the last 60 years, they have been pushing these ideas. Oh, the Black woman needs to go out here and be this single mom and you're out here so-called thinking that you're in survival mode. And again, I have to call BS on that. You're sitting here talking about you're in survival mode when you're a millionaire, you're a celebrity who's out here getting lots of acting gigs and production gigs. You're not in survival mode because you're supported by your former husband, you're supported by your agent, you're supported by your publicist. How are you in survival mode like many of the single mothers here in the South Bronx who usually, after they go out here and have the baby for the guy that they're involved with, usually wind up ass out at the end of the day? So your Tia Mowry sitting up here talking about she's in survival mode. No, you don't even know what survival mode is. And as somebody who has lived in the South Bronx and seen mothers on welfare in Section 8, no, that's survival mode, where you're basically, your whole life is in the hands of some caseworker. And if they don't like you, your entire life falls completely apart. No, those single mothers, their lives are in survival mode. And usually their entire support system winds up falling apart because usually in a lot of cases, mama ain't going to be there to help you out with this child because usually mama's got her own bitterness over the guy that left her and walked out on her, and usually is angry at you because she is jealous of your youth and beauty. So this is something your Tia Mowry, she's sitting up here talking about, oh, I'm in survival mode. And I'm going to leave a link to that article because, again, this is just some mind-boggling, stupid stuff that I'm hearing from an extremely irresponsible celebrity. I mean, you're not in survival mode because you're living a privileged life. And I'm leaving a link to this whole article in the chat. You can listen to this absolute nonsense that this woman is saying. And you're not in survival mode like many of these hood single mothers who basically are living day to day. If they're on the welfare system and if they have a job, they're usually living paycheck to paycheck. They're in survival mode because they don't have that man in their life to be the leader, to set a direction for them. They don't have that man to provide for them and their kids, because in some cases they ran that man off because they bought into the cool feminist rhetoric and thought they could do better on their own, not seeing how they're out here being supported by big business and the government. No, most of your single mothers out here, they get support from behind the scenes from these men in big business and the government. And usually those women will go out here, they're in survival mode because the state doesn't have the relationship based on love or trust. No, it's just a business transaction. and that business transaction can be terminated by the state at any time. And I talk about this in depth in The Woman Crisis. But your Tia Mowry wants us to believe a Hollywood celebrity who has her own agent, has her own publicist, and is making millions of dollars is in survival mode. This is the most absurd thing I have ever heard in my life. And it just absolutely disgusts me to hear this kind of statement because you have a woman who is a Pied Piper misleading the sisters, making them believe, oh, your survival mode is the same as actual survival mode that many working sisters out here wind up dealing with every day. Because women out here who are dealing with survival mode, they understand, again, all it takes is them losing a job and they may be out the door because they're living paycheck to paycheck if they're working. And if they're involved with these government programs like a Section 8 or a WIC or welfare, again, all it takes is one caseworker getting in their feelings. And once that caseworker gets in your feelings, your case is cut off and you're out here struggling, trying to find some way to make ends meet. That's the fate of a woman in survival mode because she has no man to protect her. She has no man to cover her. She has no man to go out here and be her support. No, she's on her own and she's vulnerable. But we have this dysfunctional Hollywood celebrity wanting to go out here and romanticize the idea of single motherhood, romanticize the idea, oh, I can do it by myself. When we clearly, if you go down to the South Bronx where I live, you won't see anybody out here doing it on their own very well. No, you will see a lot of dysfunction because many of these kids who come from these single mother households where the woman is out here talking about how she's doing it on her own, she's usually frustrated. She's usually overwhelmed. She's usually stressed out, and she's frustrated and stressed out because she's trying to do both the job of a man and a woman, and that is something the Most High never made a woman to do. No, the Most High did not make a woman to go out here and do it on her own. And you would think that your Tia Mowry would understand this with her being a so-called Christian. As a so-called Christian, you would think that your Tia Mowry would understand that a woman cannot go out here and do things on her own because as a creation of the Most High, she was created to be a helpmeet to a man, and she was created to go out here and support that man who is her leader, her head, her covering, and her steward. And as her leader, her head, her covering, and her steward, she is supposed to have faith in that man to go out here and be her leader. But we have your Tia Mowry. She wants to go out here and say she's a Christian, but she's out here participating in behavior a woman who follows the Jezebel spirit goes out here and participates in. Because a woman who is possessed by the Jezebel spirit, she's out here talking about being the leader. She's talking about being on her own. She's talking about being the head and wanting to go out here and talk about how she's doing everything by herself. That's what a woman who is possessed by the Jezebel spirit does. She'll go out here and talk about how she's going to do it all on her own. And this Jezebel spirit is misleading your Tia Mowry, and she's out here misleading a generation of American girls and young Black women to continue following these anti-Black talking points created by white supremacists to think that they were supposed to go out here and do things on their own. Now, what's even more mind-boggling than sitting there and talking about doing things on her own is how your Tia Mowry is sitting here talking about how she had a successful marriage. I mean, this is one of the most Arkham certified talking points I have ever heard in my life. you're sitting here saying you had a successful marriage when people who have successful marriages don't go out here and divorce their husbands. No, a woman who is supposed to be a Christian and following God, the only reason why she divorces her husband is for fornication, if you believe what the black pastors say. But if you're following the Most High, the only reason why a man should be able to divorce a woman is if she's out here having sex outside of their marriage. But your Tia Mowry, she's saying that she's going to leave a successful marriage and say that that's an accomplishment. And again, that's some Arkham certified thinking if I've ever seen one, because most women who are in successful marriages don't leave a successful marriages in order to go out here and take the position of a single mother, because the position of a single mother is coming straight out of failure. When you're a single mom, it shows that your relationship with that man failed because you didn't get that man to marry you. That man is not committed to you. So your whole relationship was a complete failure, and a successful relationship usually ends in marriage. So her whole talking point and frame of thinking is absolutely, completely backwards and does not follow any sort of logic at all. No, only a completely insane person is going to sit there and say, oh, my marriage is a success, but I'm filing for divorce. No, that's what a completely insane person does, because if your marriage is a success, you're going to stay with your husband. If your marriage is a success, you're going to stay with that man, and you're going to stay in that relationship because that relationship is fulfilling both of you. No, when somebody divorces, it's because the relationship isn't working for them, and that's usually because they go out here and they come in with just completely dysfunctional frames of thinking. Like a lot what I talk about in my book, why 70% of black women are single. Many of these women, they come into these relationships with unrealistic expectations, and that's the reason why their relationships fail. And usually what they do is try to have kids because they're desperate to try to keep the relationship together. Then usually it's the woman who goes out here and wants to have the kids because she wants to continue holding the bond to the man. And they think that they can actually, again, coerce the man into continue maintaining his bond with them by having these kids. But usually this drives this guy away because in most cases, that's a whoremonger male. But that's not the case here for your Corey Hardick at all, who again was actively involved with his children and out here actively still engaged with his children. Again, most single mothers who come from the hood, they would, if they had a child's father in their life who was a husband, they would jump at that chance, and they would jump at that chance because they know that don't have a man in their life, and they would want to have that man in their life. They're sitting there with these kids, frustrated and overwhelmed. They would love to have a Corey Hardick in their life to be their husband and be there in the lives of their children. That's what many women who are in the hood, who are single mothers, like places like the South Bronx, they would be eager to have a husband. They would be eager to have a man in their home, and they would want to have that because when you've been a single mom and you're sitting in that home and you're frustrated and overwhelmed because you got to take care of these kids, you got to take care of this house, and you don't have the time to do it because you got to do everything because you're trying to do the role of the man and the woman. You're basically overwhelmed because you've only got only 24 hours in a day. And with only 24 hours in a day, you don't have the time to even take a shower, especially if you have toddlers. I mean, you've got to be on these kids basically every minute of the day. And the only reprieves you get basically are when you go to work, because you've got to be with those kids basically 24/7. But you've got Tia Mowry sitting up here in her delusional state, sitting up here telling us, okay, being a single mom is great. I mean, this is some Arkham certified talking points when you really think about it, because here you have a woman who had a good husband, but she's going to walk away from the good husband and try to sell us on the lie. Oh, I want to be a single mom, and being a single mom is great. No, it's not great from every woman I have seen here in the South Bronx, every woman I went to school with. I mean, when I went to college, the college I was at, most of the women were single mothers, and they weren't sitting up here bragging about being a single mom. No, they wish they had their child's father in their life as a husband. They wish that they had a husband who was going to be there at their side. No, whenever I hear from many of these women who got baby daddies, they wish that they had that man in their life looking to be a part of that child's life. And some of these guys actually do want to be in their child's life. Unfortunately, because a lot of these sisters bought into white feminism, they went out here and drove their man away, trying to make that man submit to that relationship on their terms. But they don't even see how their own behavior is what drives these guys away, because no man is going to submit to you on a relationship on your terms. And the only men who do this are usually these whoremonger males who, again, just want to go out here and sweet talk a woman until she drops the skid mark thong. And then after he gets gets those draws, he then doesn't really want a relationship with the woman. No, all he wanted to do was go out here and get the draws, get a notch in his belt. And once he got the notch in his belt, he was on his way to the next woman. That's what many of these single moms here in the Bronx deal with. And they were thinking, oh, I was going to get a guy who was going to go out here and make me happy. No, what they got was a guy who was telling them exactly what they wanted to hear. And as he told them what they wanted to hear, what he did was tell them exactly what they needed to hear in order to go out here and get them to get her to drop the skid mark draws. And once she got dropped those skid mark draws and he got the carbon rod in the atomic waste reactor, he then left after he had his meltdown. Once he finished having his meltdown, he then went out here and cooled himself off by walking away, because he wasn't interested in building a life with her. No, all he was thinking about was having that little bit of fun. And after that, he would sit there and say, when you say that you're pregnant, it's not mine. It ain't mine. You ain't did nothing with me. And like we see on many episodes of Maury, usually it takes a DNA test for this guy to realize that he's a father. And even then, he's still not interested in being a father at all. But you've got your Tia Mowry, who grew up with a white zaddy and a black mother out in Germany and living out in the suburbs, living very well. She's sitting here thinking, oh, being a single mother is something people actually aspire to be. No, when I was in high school, both at Park West and Taft, I listened to many girls, and being a single mother wasn't something they aspired to. No, being a single mother was something that just happened to a lot of girls unexpectedly. And I remember being at Taft High School just before I graduated. There were a lot of very beautiful sisters that were in my English class and my zoology class. And sadly, what happened to those girls at 6, 17, and 18 years old was they became pregnant with their first child before they could even graduate. And what was really sad for me to see was to see those young girls after they got pregnant. I never saw many of those girls again, because they possibly had to drop out of high school to be that single mother. But you've got Tia Mowry, a college educated, professional black woman sitting up here romanticizing the idea that, oh, that single motherhood is a great thing. No, it's not great at all. And to sit there and say, oh, my kids are thriving. Well, I'm going to go back to a talking point of the late David Carroll as related to many of these single mothers. And the late David Carroll, he talked about how many of these single mothers, yeah, they enjoy that honeymoon period where these kids are little. Yeah, that honeymoon period is one that these single moms enjoy until that puberty comes in. And when that puberty comes in and you've got a son like a Tia Mowry has, that's when the honeymoon is over, because that's when that boy starts to get that growth spurt. That's when his voice deepens, and that's when he starts challenging you and the boundaries of your home. And when that boy starts to challenge that mother, that's when these women, they go from being frustrated and overwhelmed to just completely winding up malfunctioning at this point. And I go in depth on this in my book, The Man Crisis, about how when these teenage boys enter puberty, these beta male boys, and they're testing boundaries, they're challenging your authority, and they go out here, they become so much that these women basically do several responses as related to malfunctioning. Usually they wind up denying anything that anybody says as related to their child, which is what I call the my baby ain't hurt nobody. Or they let it go in one ear and out the other because they can't process the idea of their child growing up. Or they just go out here and they just completely shut down and tune everything out as related to that child, because what happens is they wind up so overwhelmed at the idea of having to deal with a boy that they don't know how to discipline because the boy is completely out of control. Then that's when they want to call themselves, they're not bragging about, oh, I love being a single mom. That's when they want to call themselves bringing the father into the relationship. But that's when you're too little too late, because this boy is wild and out. He's never learned how to respect male authority and male authority figures. And because he doesn't know how to respect male authority and male authority figures, what happens is there's no way to control this boy until either law enforcement does it, or one of these hood wolves or one of these wolves in the street goes out here and does it. And usually that's when everything ends in tragedy. But you'll have your Tia Mowry sitting up there talking about, oh, my kids are wonderful. No, it ain't going to be wonderful for you with this son in a couple of years, because he's getting close to entering puberty and you're going to be in for a nightmare. And that's when you're going to realize, yeah, I need this father in here, because being a single mom, when you're dealing with a teenage boy, oh, that's a nightmare. And it's one where you're not going to be able to handle what's going on with this boy. No, it's going to be too much, because when these teenage boys wild out, when they're out here wild and out, that's when many of these women who think, oh, I'm this big boss chick, I'm this woman who's doing my own thing, that's when her thing starts to crumble. And that's when she really just falls completely apart, because she can't lead a male who is bucking against her. And with no man in the home to stand up to this boy and show him where the line is, that's when she winds up going out here and falling completely apart, because she's not used to dealing with a teenage boy who is almost a man in as related to his physical size, but still is a child as related to his mind, and is not getting any of the guidance that he needs. And because he's not getting that guidance from another man who's laying lines and boundaries as related to discipline and structure, what you got is a boy who is going to become one of these children of the corn, who's going to grow up like a stalk and then eventually become a man in crisis. And I also look at Tia Mowry's daughter, and I also see how she's on the road to becoming a woman in crisis, because when there's no father in the home to meet the emotional needs of a daughter, what happens is that daughter winds up becoming the victim of abuse. And as she becomes the victim of abuse by the mother, because she's insecure, what she does is go out here and take out all of her anger and frustration on her daughter, because her daughter is now competition for her as related to getting so-called happy. Because there is no man to meet her emotional needs, what happens is many of these young girls, what happens is that they wind up becoming targeted by the mother, because the mother sees them as competition for her being out here in this social marketplace. Now, usually when a woman gets married and she's leaving the social marketplace, and once she leaves the social marketplace, she's getting her emotional needs met by her husband, and he's the one helping meet her emotional needs. So she's not out here looking for so-called happy from some dude out here, or whatever gimmick that is pushed out here. No, because she's got her man as her head and her covering, she's getting her emotional needs met by that man. And that makes it where her daughter can grow up to go out here and find her own partner once she comes of age. But when you have a single mother, she's out here in the social marketplace competing with other women for the attention for a smaller pool of men. Because as women get older, the pool of men who would actually be interested in them starts to dwindle. And your Tia Mowry at 44 years old, the pool is basically dried up at this point. And with the pool drying up, she's basically thinking, oh, I'm going to go out here and travel to be so-called happy. No, she's not going to be happy, because most of the women who follow this paradigm, and I did a lot of research on women who follow this paradigm, they usually wind up miserable, and they wind up miserable because they go out into a world thinking that they can go out here and recapture their youth. Unfortunately, the social marketplace has completely changed at this point, and it's changed for the worse, because they're trying to compete with younger women in the social marketplace for a pool of shrinking men who now are actualizing their potential and now have other options, and they are not really interested in getting involved with a single mother who has two children by another man, because that whole situation is a dysfunctional one. But you have your Tia Mowry romanticizing single motherhood, talking about her happiness, and again, being misled by the Jezebel spirit to believe being a single mother is better than being a wife in God's natural order. So she's sitting here thinking, oh, being a wife, being not a wife, but being a single mother in the world is better than being a wife in God's natural order, but being a single mother in the world is not better at all, because basically you are sitting there trying to go out here and meet your needs on your own without God, and you're looking to go out here and live outside of the protection and covering of God. You're looking to live outside of the Most High, who is the supplier of all a woman's and a man's needs, and you want to go out here and do things on your own. But God did not make the woman to go out here and be able to do things on her own. And when she tries to go out here and do things on her own, she winds up falling flat on her face, because while many of these beta males and manginas and some of these feminists will egg a black woman on, they enable her dysfunction because they know that she is going to fail. And as they enable her to go out here and do this whole so-called independent woman thing as a single mother, they are sitting there snickering and laughing at her in the back. and counting down the time until she completely falls apart. I mean, it's again like what the late David Carroll talked about as related to Carrie going to the prom, and those people who were encouraging her to go to the prom, they were basically setting her up for failure, and they knew that she was socially awkward, and it didn't matter what she did. What was going to happen is that she was going to be the punchline of a cruel joke that would lead to her becoming a complete laughingstock. But you can't explain this to your feminist indoctrinated women like Tia Mowry, who has walked away from the Bible and is buying into ideas from so-called therapists, and like what Ringo talks about, because there are shady and unethical therapists who will go out here and mislead a woman into going on this quest for happiness. And this has been going on ever since the 60s, because I remember watching a movie on this TV where they talked about this woman who was married to a lawyer and they had a good marriage. And she wound up leaving her husband for so-called happiness, but wound up becoming a drug addict and eventually wound up going broke. That's something that they don't tell the women out here like Tia Mowry about going out here and who are romanticizing single motherhood. They're sitting there thinking, oh, I'm going to go out here and be this independent woman who has it all. But what happens to many of those women who have it all is they wind up with absolutely nothing at the end of the day, and they wind up with absolutely nothing because they didn't go out here and want to invest in their foundation in Christ. And as they walked away from God and wanted to go their own way with the feminists, talking about being a single mother, promoting the narratives of being a single mother, many of these women wind up completely miserable, and they wind up completely miserable, not understanding that the Jezebel spirit has misled them. And as the Jezebel spirit has misled them, many of these women wind up going from the road to the kingdom straight on a road to hell, because as they romanticize these talking points presented to them by female white supremacists, because a feminist is basically a female white supremacist, they go out here buying into these white supremacist talking points, buying into these white supremacist ideas. And as they buy into this, thinking that white supremacy is going to empower them, they don't see how the white supremacist takes them away from their black man. And that's what your Tia Mowry ain't seeing, because she's out here looking to go straight to the hood that most single mothers here in the Bronx would wish they could run away from. I mean, if you were to put a single mother from the hood in Tia Mowry's place and have her with a husband, I guarantee you they would be staying with their husband, because they understand what it means to be out here when you are a single mom. Because being a single mom, that is, again, a frustrating and overwhelming thing. And it's really not a place where it's healthy to raise children, because it's not healthy to be able to have a child in a home where it's just you and them and you're struggling, or you're out here and you got all these different men coming in and out of the home. This is not a healthy environment at all. And again, I grew up around this environment, and I can tell you it's not something people go out here and aspire to be. No, the only people who aspire to do this are people who I believe are Arkham certified, because only Arkham certified women who refuse to submit to the Most High, they go out here and want to defy God by going out here and saying, oh, I can have a baby on my own terms. I can go out here and do things the way I want them to do. But if you don't go God's way, you're going to go and become spiritually lost. And that's what's happening here with your Tia Mowry, who is romanticizing dysfunctional narratives like single motherhood and thinking that, oh, this is something to be celebrated. This is something to go out here and talk about, and not seeing how these white supremacists in your black media outlets and other outlets, they go out here and use you as the poster child to promote these anti-black narratives, because what the white supremacist wants to do is put a black face on single motherhood. And here we have Tia Mowry making herself the black face of single motherhood. I mean, this is just dysfunctional when you really think about it. Here's a so-called black woman who is out here just compromising her everything as related to the values her mother taught her. I mean, her mother was out here married to this man and is still married to this man, but she's talking about finding happiness in single motherhood, basically throwing away everything that her mother raised her on, all because she is insecure, as I see it, about her own mortality, not understanding that she's getting ready to put her own eternal life at risk, because while she's upset about the passing of several relatives and is afraid of aging, this is what the devil used to step in the door and send the Jezebel spirit to her to influence her. And as this Jezebel spirit has influenced her, it's put her whole spiritual life in jeopardy, because the things that she's doing right now run counter to everything that she learned in the Bible she said that she read growing up, and runs counter to her former Christian values. This all runs completely counter to everything she has learned. And she's not only putting the lives of her children in jeopardy, she's also putting her own eternal life in jeopardy. Because when you go out here and you walk away from the Most High, that's when you fall into the hands of the Lord. And that is one of the worst places anybody could fall into, because when you go out here and walk away from the Most High, you fall into those hands. And in those hands, you can possibly wind up suffering in this world and the next one. So that's what can happen to you when you don't understand what's going on as related to how your life in this world relates to your spiritual life. You don't know how you may be putting your eternal life at risk. And this is something many women don't understand, because your pastors will not preach these sermons. And because your pastors will not preach these sermons, what happens is that these women, they're on this road to hell, and not understanding how their good intentions for so-called happiness leads to them winding up on the road to hell from those so-called good intentions, like your Tia Mowry has, believing, oh, I'm going to find this happiness in single motherhood. I'm going to be able to travel and live my life. No, what you're going to do is fall into a lot of pitfalls, because there's no husband to go out here and protect and cover you. And because there's no husband to protect and cover you and look out for you so that you won't get exploited and taken advantage of, like I've heard that Corey Hardick was trying to do when your Tia Mowry was out here posting those thirst trap photos. You had a husband there looking to protect his wife's image, but this wife, instead of standing with her husband, goes and stands against him by filing for divorce. And as she goes out here and files for divorce, what happens is that this woman goes from being covered by a husband to being exploited by a bunch of people who want to celebrate her turn, not understanding that this woman is about to get turned out. And when they don't understand that there are a lot of wolves out there looking at a older woman like this and looking to go out here and turn her out, similar to what happened in your Zora Neale Hurston's novel, Their Eyes Were Watching God, with your Virgil Tea Cake Woods. I mean, that's what he did to your Janie Crawford in Their Eyes Are Watching God, because she had no husband, she had no covering, and because she was insecure about her older age, she got taken advantage of by this wolf, this Virgil Tea Cake Woods, who basically blew all her money on him. And then you've got a lot of other women who are out here who thought, oh, I'm going to be able to go out here and walk away from my husband and find a better man, not understanding you're walking into a shark tank full of sharks. And many of those sharks, they're just looking for a nice, big, fat, juicy female to, sugar mama to go out here and get a taste of. And after they go out here and get her to drop the skid mark thong, and then get her to go out here and get them the taste of the atomic waste in their May December romance. Many of these guys, they got side chicks, and usually they just take the money from the sugar mama and give it to the side chick. And many of these women wind up broke and then wind up on their way to a place called Bust Downtown. And again, this is what happens when you have single women on the single mother paradigm and the feminist paradigm. Many of those women, they wind up thinking, oh, I'm going to be able to have a great life. I'm going to find a so-called good man, but there's no good man at the end of the road, because the good man you walked away from, that was your only chance at having a husband. But you won't hear this from many of those guys out there, because again, they just want you to drop the thong so that they can get that taste of the atomic waste, get a little cash, and some of them even want a place to stay. But you can't explain that to your hard-headed women like your Tia Mowry, who have gone out here and heard all of these so-called romanticized ideas about single motherhood told to them in lots of feminist media. No, you need to come down to places like the South Bronx, listen to real single moms who will tell you the truth about single motherhood, who will tell you the truth about how these kids are going to become extremely rebellious, and some of them are going to have extreme daddy issues. No, you need to sit down and talk to real single mothers who will tell you about how there's no traveling, because you got to go out here and cover all of these bills, like the maintenance. If you have a home like she does, a maintenance on that home, the property tax, the insurance, all that is you at this point. Instead of it just being your husband, it's all you at this point. And as you're trying to pay all those bills, there ain't going to be much money for your so-called happiness, because you got to take responsibility for taking care of all of those bills. That's what people like your Tia Mowry don't understand. They don't understand that the single mom, she's got to go out here and cover all them bills. And once you cover all them bills, and like your property tax, your maintenance, your insurance, your groundskeepers or your contractors, you got to pay for all of that stuff. All that's coming out your pocket, because you didn't want the man to go out here and take care of business. You didn't want the man to go out here and provide for those needs. You didn't want the man to go out here and work to go out here and help you and work with you towards building anything. No, you push the man out of his home. You push the man out of his children's lives, and you push the man out. But now you're covering everything and talking about you're a boss chick. Well, most of the boss chicks I've seen wind up completely overwhelmed by all of the responsibilities, and they don't need to be overwhelmed at all, because there's a guy out here who's a logical and critical thinker. There's guys out there who want to go out here and lead. There's guys out there who want to go out here and show you how to manage that home long term, so you can focus on the day to day. And usually when there's a guy at home, a woman can go out here and get a shower or take a bath, because there ain't no kids that are out here unsupervised. That's what happens when you have a husband. That's what happens when you have a man. You can go out here and breathe and relax. You have space to go out here and do things, because there's balance to your life. And because there's balance to your life, you're not sitting up here pulling out your hair, being stressed out. You have time to breathe, and you don't have all sorts of people, again, around your kids that don't need to be around your kids, because your man is out here protecting your home and vetting them and vetting all sorts of materials and content that to make sure that your home is not going to be made into a toxic environment. But you can't explain that to Tia Mowry, because she's got this fantasy about single motherhood. And that fantasy about single motherhood is, oh, I'm doing it all by myself, never understanding the role Corey Hardick had in his family. I mean, Corey Hardick had a major role in his family, But many women don't appreciate that man until he's gone or his role has been minimized. They don't appreciate that man because they are drinking the feminist Kool-Aid. And as they're drinking that feminist Kool-Aid, they're believing, oh, I'm doing it all by myself, but can't see how the government is doing stuff for them, can't see how big business is giving them that job, can't see how government is giving them those subsidies and giving them all of these different things, and how they're wedded to a state that is doing all of this for them. They can't see that at all. No, they're sitting there thinking, "Oh, I got rid of this man," when this man was one of the best things that could happen to them. And again, women who have successful marriages don't end their marriage because they understand marriages are not just they are a covenant of God, but they also allow a family to build wealth, and they allow a family to go out here and create wealth for the next generation. And that's something single mothers can't go out here and do. No, single mothers don't build wealth because single mothers are consumers, and single mothers go out here and spend lots of money, like your Tia Mowry wants to do in her romanticized ideas, talking about how she's going on this quest to get to happy. I have to wonder if she's smoking the same crack that Terry McMillan was smoking when she wrote the Waiting to Exhale sequel, Getting to Happy. And maybe your Tia Mowry needs to go out here and read Terry McMillan's Getting to Happy, because all four of those women in that sequel never got to happy. No, in their quest to get to happy, most of those women, your Bernadine, your Savannah, your Robin, and your Gloria, all wound up miserable because as they were going on this quest to get to happy, all of those women wound up becoming women in crisis. And we saw the conclusion of those women in crisis as they wound up becoming miserable in their own company. Same thing for that show Sex and the City when they did the sequel to Sex and the City on HBO Max, and your Carrie Bradshaw wound up with Mr. Big dying. That's when those women wound up miserable. Again, all of these women looking to get their emotional needs met from the economic institutions of big business. But as they were looking to get those emotional needs met on their quest to get to happy, we saw the end game was nothing but misery. So this whole quest, when you hear women talking about, I'm not happy and I'm looking for happiness, that's a spiritually lost woman. And spiritually lost women, they wind up going in a vicious circle where their lives go completely down the drain, and their lives go completely down the drain because they walk away from the Most High looking for happiness from the world, not understanding that perfect peace comes from the Most High. And with perfect peace coming from the Most High, you're not going to find that in the world system. No, you're not going to find that at all in the world system. No, all you're going to find is loneliness in the world. And it's just not going to, you're not going to find that, because if you leave God's natural order, all you're going to have is chaos. One Phobos, thank you for coming on, and a salute Rayhana for coming on. I have to thank Kid Organic for giving me a shout out. Yeah, he makes some of the best content on YouTube, and I really like watching his videos because he's really coming at things from really a critical thinking perspective, and he makes some of the best content on YouTube. So I'm thanking him for the shout out. And Tanya's Darkroom 007, she talked about All About Maryland. I have to say Tia Mowry's doing worse than All About Maryland, because at least Maryland at the end of Act 1 woke up from the delusion she had about Hollywood and realized that this business was killing her. But your Tia Mowry, she doesn't see how her whole quest to be a boss chick is destroying her life, and it's just messing her up. What's going on, Queens of Virtue? J.R. Meadows, glad to see you here. What's going on, D Wood 78? I'm glad to see you here. Just glad to see everybody here, and thank you for the Cash App, brother. I really appreciate it. If you guys want to donate to the Cash App, you can donate as well. But when I listen to Tia Mowry sitting up here romanticizing single motherhood, it just really burns me up because as somebody who has lived here in the South Bronx for 49 years, I can just tell you most women, they don't want to become single mothers. They are not interested in becoming single mothers. It's usually something that just happens to them in some cases. And then there are other ones who are just deliberately trying to go out here and coerce a man into marriage and commitment. But nobody willfully and intentionally just walks down that road. And I just look at her behavior, and again, it just is just completely backwards. I mean, you don't see. I mean, if you lived here in the Bronx, most of the women here weren't interested in becoming single mothers. They don't promote that idea. Oh, I'm a single mom. I'm proud of being a single mom. No, they were. So many women regret doing this, and if they had to relive their life, they would do it differently because the whole life of a single mother is hard. It's a lot of pain, but you got, again, this irresponsible celebrity just out here promoting this idea like it's some sort of badge of honor. And as somebody who, again, has lived in this in this Bronx and seen many of these single mothers, it is not a badge of honor at all for any of those women. And many of the women who talk about I like being a single mom when they're young, they regret it when they get older. And many of those women wish they had their child's father in their lives. They wish they had their child's mother out here. You know, not child's father out here. I just made a mistake. But they want that father in their lives. They want that husband in their lives. They want to have that relationship with that husband. They want to have that man in their life. And many of them don't. The reason why they want becoming single mothers is because they didn't have a father to teach them and show them an example of manhood to understand what type of man to look for when they go out here and look for a husband. And many of them, they grew up with this dysfunctional mindset that, oh, I need to have a boyfriend, not understanding the ultimate goal of a courtship is marriage, but they have been put on the road to dating, and the road to dating has no goal, but the road to courtship has a goal, which is marriage. But you have many of these women like Tia Mowry, it's the blind leading the blind, and she's leading many young black girls into a ditch by sitting up there romanticizing single motherhood and presenting it as something positive. No, there is nothing positive about being a single mother. There's nothing positive about being a baby mama. No, nobody goes into a marriage talking about how a successful marriage ends in divorce. No, these are the talking points that are completely illogical, but they are the points that the Jezebel spirit misleads a woman into. And as she's misled, she sits there and spouts white supremacist talking points, not understanding how the media uses these talking points to promote anti-black racism and try to socially engineer the dysfunctional mindset of single mothers into another generation of young women who would wind up spiritually lost if they buy into your Tia Mowry's dysfunctional rhetoric. Now, I'm going to get ready to wrap up tonight's stream. And if you want to go out here and learn more about the dysfunctional narratives of many of the black women like Tia Mowry, you can pick up why 70% of black women are single on Amazon right now. And if you want to learn more about how women like Tia Mowry wind up becoming spiritually lost and what leads to them winding up on this so-called road to happiness that leads to misery, you can pick up The Woman Crisis on Amazon.com. Or you can find those books on Amazon.com along with the book Tanya's Darkroom 007 mentioned, which really reflects the whole washed up actress part of Tia Mowry, which is all about Marilyn. You can find all about Marilyn in paperback and Kindle format. And you can also find all about Maryland in paperback and Kindle format. And you can find the books of the SJS Direct 2022 catalog on Amazon.com as well. I have a lot of positive books on SJS Direct on Amazon, and they all make great gifts for the holiday season. So there's a lot, of great books on there. And your Tia Mowry, as I see it, definitely needs to go out here and read some of them, like The Woman Crisis and Why 70% of Black Women Are Single, because she's doing all the things that lead to her being single. So what's going on, Matt Torrance? I'm getting ready to go out here and wrap up tonight's stream. I want to thank everybody for coming out to tonight's stream, and I hope you'll be there for next week's stream.